Scientists have issued a global distress call.
And the devastating impact of modern civilization on the
human
natural
race is destroying the natural world. It's such an unsustainable rate.
We've lost much of our forests, much of our native wetlands.
Starting from the birds, the impalas, we started now to look to kill the elephant. It is when we can find the rent of money. If I got more money, I can educate my child.
If your people are dying because of starvation, then wildlife is a low priority.
We're completely unprepared for that huge scourge of poaching.
With the poaching which is there this time around, if we just let it be, it will just be history that we had elephant. We had all these species.
A glimmer of hope from scientists.
We have not lost the battle, and if given a chance, nature will reconquer its rights and will prevail.
Well, hi, and welcome to the Friday Harbor Film Festival Director Series, and this is the Q&A with our director, Mirra Bank, and we're going to be discussing her film, No Fear, No Favor. My name is Susan Waters. I'm one of the board members for the Friday Harbor Film Festival, and it's just my pleasure to welcome Mirra today. It's wonderful to have you, and thank you so much for joining us. Are we having some technical difficulties still? I'm not hearing your audio.
I can hear you.
Oh, there you are.
Oh,
Yay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Mirra. I appreciate you being here. This is really, for me, so much of an important film, and it hits home for me too, because I have spent some time in Africa, in some of the areas similar to where you were filming. And I'm just curious, how did you come to tell this story? What brought you to this story?
Like a lot of films, this came out of a personal passion and out of a long association that my husband and I have had with the Nature Conservancy. And at a point several years ago where actually I'm hearing an echo. I'm so sorry. It's hard for me to speak because I'm hearing an echo.
Let
You're
me
not
see if
hearing it on your side?
I'm not. Let me see if I mute myself while you're speaking, if that helps at all.
Okay. Oh, I'm still hearing it, but I'll try to do it anyway. My husband was giving a lecture in Cape Town, and we had been involved with the Nature Conservancy. I'm sorry, it's very hard because I'm hearing this echo. We'd been involved with the Nature Conservancy for a number of years with a particular interest in their Africa programs. And so we asked them, we're going to be in Cape Town. Is there something you're doing in South Africa that we can see, that we can visit, get involved with? And they said, well, we're not working in South Africa, but we have this new program in Zambia. Would you be willing to take a look there? And we said, yes, absolutely. And they connected us to all of their people in the Kafue reserve, in the projects they were doing there. And it opened out into what became a very deep and meaningful connection to not just anti-poaching worker, but to the whole initiative for community conservancies and the involvement of local communities with conservation efforts.
How long were you, did it take for you to film the components of this? I know that you traveled to various locations in Africa. So how long did you work on this in the field?
We were working really on and off over more than 3 years. There was a gap in there, and it obviously wasn't constant. This was coming and going, but it began in Zambia, and based on the connections we made there, we knew we wanted to go back, and we wanted to, at that point, connect much more with these sort of local conservancy projects. And in the interim, we also became connected to work in both Namibia and North Kenya. My interest in those places, again, was largely because they had a tradition of longstanding policies that made the community ownership of wildlife and both the responsibility and the benefits of that community engagement a matter of right to people who live there. That doesn't mean that it works without problems. Every country has its own version of the difficulties of financing, local politics, different poaching issues, different kinds of livelihoods that are involved. But in both Namibia and Kenya, there was a sort of internal constitutional endorsement of this model. In Zambia, it was much more recent. It was trying to get up and on its feet. And so the film gave me an opportunity to sort of explore that in these 3 different dimensions of how stakeholder involvement in wildlife is a specific, not the biggest piece of anti-poaching and environmental protection, but a critical piece of it.
You know, and I'm struck too, and you definitely touched on this in the film. And when I spent my time in Kenya on the 2 projects that I worked in that were also community involvement in community conservancies for wildlife conservation as well. And, you know, it's not a single issue. It's kind of this big tangled ball of issues. And I know you touched on the export of ivory and pangolin and whatnot into the Asian market. That's one piece of it. Another piece is the community development and the need for economic development. You know, it's when I look at that, it's a huge issue, and it's so multifaceted. In working with the people that are on the ground there, as you were filming, what do you think are the most important components that can make a successful program?
Oh, that's the $64,000 question. I think if, you know, all the wonderful NGOs and different groups who are working there could figure that out, there'd be a sort of quantum leap in how these community engagement projects might work. I think I'm speaking strictly from my own experience. This is observational. It's, you know, other people might have a different experience of it, but from my engagement with people, there's a sense so often that governments or local agencies haven't delivered. They haven't fulfilled promises that have been made or finalized projects and infrastructure for things to happen. So I think the critical piece of it is doing something that's specific, local, and something that is not so complicated that it can't be accomplished is the main thing. Because once people see that things are working, they buy in and they want to be part of it. A very good example of that in North Kenya is what's happened with Northern Rangelands Trust and the different conservancies that have become part of that umbrella group. And there was tremendous resistance at the beginning. And then when these conservancies were up and running, when tourism began to bring in jobs, education, expanded range of livelihoods, and governance, real self-governance in a way that was practical at every level: health, education, women's empowerment, engagement with pastoralists and their needs. When those things were working, other communities would come in and say, we want to be part of this. So it's all politics are local. If you can make these conservancies work where people live and with the conditions that they're living with, then your chances are much better.
Oh my gosh, I think you really hit the nail on the head with that, because every local community has their own priorities and their own challenges. So it does really have to be a local solution to bring everybody on board. And I know tourism plays a part in that, and that those dollars can help the economic development and make wildlife conservation something that becomes important to the local communities. And I'm wondering if you've had any talks or discussions with the folks that you were working with in the filming based on the pandemic and what happened, as you know, virtually tourism being shut down for so long. And I know I had read a number of articles about concerns about the increase in poaching as a result of tourism being shut down during the pandemic. Do you have any feedback or input from the folks in those conservancies?
I have been in touch with the Nature Conservancy with Matt Brown is the head of the Africa program, and I've attended a number of online discussions, some of them actually quite recently with women from North Kenya, which is an area I'm very, and people I'm very interested in. And they have had big problems, not just in Kenya, but in other areas, because without tourism, without the dollars, without being able to pay the protectors and all of the people who, you know, serve wildlife protection interests, to say nothing of the hospitality workers who don't have people, you know, to guide or to help in the places they're staying. There's no income, and it's a kind of devolution of all the services that would ordinarily be going on there. On the other hand, there's a natural tendency for things to rebound if they're left alone. So I don't know if anybody knows for sure, you know, once we come out on the other side of this, how bad the lack of tourism income will be strictly for the wildlife. I think for the people, it's a big problem. And, you know, it's terrible.
Is there any recovery starting in those areas now, or is it still pretty well limited in terms of tourist dollars coming in?
I'm not really up to speed on all of that. My sense is that at least the areas that we were working in are closed down to tourism, but honestly, I'm not completely up to speed on it. I'm not sure. And I think it does, you know, it does vary depending on, you know, how close you are to a big city where people maybe can see wildlife more locally. But in the deeper sort of wilderness areas, to the best of my knowledge, there's very little going on.
Another component of your film that, for me personally, I truly appreciated was highlighting the importance of education for young people. And I think at one point one of the rangers was talking about the fact that many young people, they'd never seen an elephant. And I experienced that too, where I was down by Savo in southeastern Kenya, and they ran education programs very similar to that, because for many kids, we talk about our kids here in the United States, and oftentimes they've seen elephants, at least in the zoo, more so than many kids in communities in Africa. And that education component in having them at an early age begin to learn to appreciate the great diversity that they have in their countries is really cool. So I want to thank you for really highlighting so many components, not only of the problem, but of the solution.
Well, it's equally about the people, it has to be. These are the people who are living where that interface happens, particularly I'm thinking certainly in Zambia, where the large protected wilderness areas are ringed by what are called game management areas. And that's where the village settlements are. And traditionally, people hunted, they had access, to all of whatever was in the ecosystem. And when these areas became national parks, that changed, and settlements were not allowed, internally. So people experienced elephants or lions as creatures that were crop raiding or, killing their livestock. So it is a whole reorientation to cohabiting in these areas, because animals don't know where a park begins or ends or a protected area. And where there's no fencing, they go where they go. So a lot of the education is about this shared landscape where farmers or people in villages have the means to protect their livelihoods without killing the animals. And of course, not all the education is just about wildlife, but wildlife is and a reorientation to the relationship with wildlife is the way into lots of things: botany, biology, history of these regions, and the sciences. So it's a total handle. So it's a pragmatic handle that's a great tool for education.
Well, you told the story beautifully, and the photography is incredible. And
thank you.
Especially, it's a place that's very close to my heart, and having not been able to travel there for a couple of years as a result of the shutdowns, I really appreciated being able to experience it through your photography and the storytelling. It's such an important story, and I hope that many people get to see that. What type of feedback are you getting from audiences as they view this film?
It's been terrific, I have to say. As it happens right now, there are a number of kind of streaming events going on, and I'm getting a lot of wonderful comments, and very gratifying to me that people are taken with the way the film looks, because I shot it. It's the first film I've shot I've done other shooting on my films, but this really was primarily 99% my shooting. And these were sometimes difficult conditions. No internet, the only electricity was generator or the lighter in a safari vehicle to plug into. So it was challenging. But I think what I'm struck by is that the emotional core of the film is also reaching people. They're having the kind of intimate relationship with creatures like this baby elephant that does not survive in our film, and the baby pangolin that they work so hard to save. And it allows people to have that experience of being in a position to try to sustain life and to have to sometimes make hard decisions about what the best thing is to do. And I wasn't sure, because especially when you're shooting a film, in a funny way, you almost have no distance from what you're shooting. But when other people see it and report back to you that they're having those experiences, it means a lot. So that's been very nice.
Well, it meant a lot to me for sure. And I really thank you for that, for the story. Do you have any plans, or have you considered following up at a future date in terms of more of the story of maybe the people that were in the film or other people that are doing similar things?
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned that. I mean, we were able to go back a couple of times to Zambia and also to Namibia. There's a story that I would love to follow up on also in North Kenya. And I did some shooting that's not in the film that could potentially be the beginning of this other project if we can all ever get back to Africa. And that was in North Kenya. The Reteti Elephant Sanctuary is a community conservancy. The head keeper there, a woman named Dorothy, was really eloquent on the subject of what it meant for her to become involved in conservation and to be educated, to have the chance to pull in her sisters, her cousins, other women she knew, and very specifically from the point of view of giving girls the option not to marry at the age of 14 or 15 and begin to have children, and to really have their lives revolve around, a family and the sort of pastoralist existence that many young girls will wind up leading in that part of Kenya. What can I say? She said, it makes us equals. Girls are getting equal education, and they're having the choice to be here, to have these very interesting, jobs, this life work, caring for these animals, meeting people from other parts of the world. It's a real game changer. And it's not for everyone, but one wants to know that has a foothold, and that it's going to be a choice for people going forward.
I hope you have the opportunity in the future to tell that story. And if you need anyone to carry your bags, I totally volunteer. I'm right there anytime you need that. There's so many stories, and they're all so interconnected, and it's just a real delight to have been able to chat with you a bit about this film. It's a very important film. And before we sign off, I'd just like to give you an opportunity as well, if there's anything that we haven't touched on, or something that you would, you'd like to speak to in regard to this topic, please.
One thing I did want to just, I don't know, go back to in the film is that one of our principal characters is Kingsley. And Kingsley was a long-time elephant poacher. And what happened to him is not unusual. Eventually, he was tracked down, and partly because getting convictions, this is in Zambia, can be very difficult, can be really complicated. Sometimes what happens, as it did in his case, is that a poacher is given the choice to join forces with law enforcement and to become a protector of these animals, and also to work with enforcement to help track down other poachers or to face going to jail. And he chose to become a protector and to work with wildlife law enforcement protection services. And it's not as easy as it might seem to make that choice, because it doesn't pay as well as poaching, but the risks are infinitely higher with big time poaching. So a lot of hearts and minds issues are at stake here. And one thing that would really help would be for people like Kingsley, who make that choice and make the commitment, to be righteously rewarded for their work. Everyone who does this kind of work, because it's important. And people go back and forth, and sometimes they poach again. But hopefully, going forward, they've really made the conversion. And for the people who have, you really feel that it's something they are going to pass on to their children. Certainly the people we met, like Annette and Kelvin and Kingsley, all talked about it in terms of wanting their children to have this in their future as something that they do.
That's a great component to the story. We have a question coming in from someone watching our Q&A, and this is from Heather, and she asks, are the poachers aware that the animals they're killing will disappear if they continue poaching?
It's a terrific question, and it goes back to the education issue that Susan brought up. One of the things kids are being taught about is the decimation numbers that Africa is facing. So I think some poachers are aware of it. It depends on who they are, but many are not so aware of it. They know they have to go further or deeper into the bush or to places they haven't been to before. But the big picture throughout Africa, because everything is connected, really, ecosystems, all have an impact on each other. It's a race against time to get people educated about that. And I think some poachers just aren't thinking in those terms. They're thinking in the now. They're desperate. They have families. They need money to feed their kids and to pay school fees. People pay to send their children to school. So they're not thinking about the big picture.
Yeah, not a priority when survival is what you're concerned about.
Yeah.
I we could go on for for quite some time, I think, on this topic. It's such an important topic, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your perspective with us, and allowing the Friday Harper Film Festival to be a part of your storytelling by streaming this film. It's just a pleasure, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you today. I just can't tell you how much I've enjoyed it.
As have I. Your questions are great. It's wonderful to talk to somebody who's also spent time in some of these environments, and feels like everybody should have that experience. And there are volunteer programs, as I know you know, but people should think about that when COVID allows it again. Going that far away is expensive, but there are a lot of ways to go there without, doing the gold-plated safari, and to go deep into a conservation interest as a volunteer. And I hope more people will do it.
I echo that. That's how I got into traveling to Africa initially, and I continue to do it. And it's such a rich experience, much more profound than being a typical tourist.
Yeah.
And the opportunity to not only spend time out in the bush, but spending time with some of the most amazing people I've ever had the pleasure to meet, as I know you feel the same way. So the offer stands. I'll carry your bags anytime. And looking forward to seeing it. Well, one last question before we go. Do you have any, do you have a project in the works now?
I have something that I've started working on in this country. I can't say too much about it yet, except that it's based in the heartland in the Middle West, and it maybe in some ways similar to when you confront a crisis like poaching. You engage with it, you get intimate with it, you work from the ground up to try to solve it. In this case, it has to do with the opioid crisis and about how to help keep families together through helping mothers to overcome addiction problems and not lose their families. So,
well, we look forward to seeing more of that. Oh, and we have one more question that's come in on chat for you. And the question is, and I know this, going back to some of your previous films, you focused on dance on a number of films. And so the question is, did you capture any dance footage while in Africa?
I wish we had gotten more. The only dance is in the film, and it's in that section where Annette and Kingsley are talking on their tracks. He's fleeing with his ivories, and she's talking about tracking down poachers. And the context is a celebration in which there's some dance going on. It's actually a harvest celebration, a local celebration in Mafue, involving the chief and the headmen and people from the community. But it's not traditional dance, really. It's traditional, but it's more celebratory than it is a structured dance. But all the more reason to go back and focus on that. I was really so much in the bush. That was, kind of the focus of these trips. But I would love to capture more dance in Africa because it's astounding. It's wonderful.
Well, we can't wait to see and hear from you in the future with more of your films. Your films are wonderful, beautiful, and they always tell amazing stories. So we look forward to that. And again, I can't thank you enough, Mirra, for spending time with us. It's just been a pleasure. Thank you.